It's midnight. You're standing in your kitchen, staring at nothing, and your body feels like someone pulled a plug somewhere deep inside. The conversation ended hours ago, but you're still in it. Still replaying what you said. Still hearing what they said. Still crafting better responses, clearer explanations, more convincing arguments for choices that were always yours to make. Your chest is tight, your jaw aches, because you've been clenching it without realizing. There's a heaviness in your stomach that wasn't there this morning. And somewhere beneath all of that, underneath the rehearsed speeches and the defensive monologues running on loop in your mind, there's a question you're afraid to ask yourself. Why did I have to explain so much? You told them about your decision. That should have been enough. But it wasn't. Or maybe it was enough, and you just couldn't believe it. So you kept going. You justified. You provided context. You listed reasons like evidence in a trial where you were both the defendant and the prosecutor. You explained your feelings, your history, your logic, your fears. You gave them everything, hoping that if you could just make them understand, they would finally stop pushing back. And now you're alone in your kitchen at midnight, exhausted by a conversation that should have taken 30 seconds. This isn't the first time. You know that. This is a pattern you've been living for so long, it feels like part of your personality. You explain your boundaries to people who never asked for them. You defend your decisions to people who have no authority over your life. You justify your feelings to people who wouldn't do the same for you. You offer your reasoning like it's rent you owe, just for taking up space in the world. And it's killing you, slowly, quietly, one explanation at a time. You can feel it in your body, the constant low-grade anxiety that hums beneath everything you do, the exhaustion that no amount of sleep seems to fix, the tightness in your throat when someone asks you a simple question and your brain immediately starts composing a dissertation, the way your heart races when you say no to something, bracing for the interrogation you've learned to expect. This is what chronic over-explanation does. It doesn't just drain your energy. It convinces you that your worth is measured by how well you can justify your existence. Think about the last time you set a boundary. Not a big one. Just something simple. You couldn't make it to an event. You didn't want to have a conversation right now. You needed some time alone. You made a choice about your own life, your own time, your own energy. And then came the question. Why? Your body tensed, your mind raced, and before you even realized what you were doing, you were explaining. You were listing reasons. You were building a case. You were trying to make them see that you had good justification, that you weren't being selfish, that you had thought it through, that you deserved to make this choice. But here's what you didn't notice in that moment. They didn't actually need all of that. Most of the time, they didn't even want it. The explanation was for you. You were trying to convince yourself that you had permission to choose. And that permission? You've been waiting for it your whole life. You've been waiting for someone to tell you that your no is enough, that your feelings don't require a footnote, that your decisions don't need a defense attorney, that you are allowed to want what you want and not want what you don't want without submitting a formal proposal for approval. But nobody's going to give you that permission, because the truth is, you never needed it in the first place. Your peace is not a debate. Let that sink in. Your peace is not something you have to argue for. It's not something you have to win in a court of public opinion. It's not something that becomes valid only after you've successfully convinced everyone around you that you deserve it. Your peace is yours. It belongs to you, and you don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting it. This is going to feel radical at first, because you've been taught the opposite. You've been taught that boundaries without explanations are rude, that saying no without providing reasons is selfish, that choosing yourself without justifying why is inconsiderate. You've been taught that other people's comfort with your choices matters more than your own need for those choices. And you believed it. Of course you did, because the people who taught you this had power over you. Parents, teachers, partners, friends, bosses, culture itself. They taught you that love is conditional on understanding, that respect requires justification, that you earn your right to autonomy by explaining it well enough. But they were wrong. The people who truly love you will never require you to shrink yourself into an explanation. The people who genuinely respect you will honor your no without needing to understand every detail of why. The relationships that are meant for you will feel spacious, not like a courtroom where you're constantly defending your right to be yourself. And the others? The ones who demand explanations? The ones who treat your boundaries like riddles they need to solve or arguments they need to win? They're showing you exactly who they are. They're telling you that their comfort matters more than your autonomy, that their understanding is more important than your peace. Believe them. Because here's what this journey is really about. This isn't just about learning to say no without explaining why. This is about remembering something you forgot a long time ago. You are not on trial. Your life is not a case you have to win. Your feelings are not evidence that needs to be verified. Your choices are not up for debate. You are allowed to exist without justification. Read that again. You are allowed to exist without justification. You don't owe anyone a detailed account of why you feel the way you feel. You don't owe anyone a breakdown of how you came to your decision. You don't owe anyone access to your inner world just because they're curious or confused or uncomfortable with your choices. Your energy is yours. And every time you over-explain, every time you justify what needs no justification, every time you defend a boundary that should be self-evident, you're giving that energy away. And you're tired. You're so tired because you've been giving it away for years. But it doesn't have to be this way. By the end of this journey, you're going to understand something that will change everything. Silence can be the most powerful statement you ever make. Not cold silence, not cruel silence, but the calm, grounded, peaceful silence of someone who knows their worth doesn't depend on anyone else's comprehension. You're going to learn that there's a difference between communication and over-explanation, that you can be clear without being defensive, that you can be kind without being accommodating, that you can love someone and still not owe them your reasoning. You're going to discover that the right people don't need lengthy explanations, and the wrong people won't be satisfied by any explanation you give, that the relationships worth keeping are the ones where your simple no is met with simple respect, where your boundaries are honored, not interrogated, where your humanity is assumed, not something you have to prove. You're going to feel what it's like to keep your energy instead of spending it on people who are never going to understand anyway. To move through your day without that constant underlying anxiety about whether you said enough, explained enough, justified enough. To go to bed at night with your peace intact instead of replaying conversations in your mind, wishing you'd said it differently. This is about reclaiming yourself, one unexplained boundary at a time, one protected moment at a time, one choice you make without seeking approval at a time. And it starts right here, right now, with the decision to stop performing for an audience that was never qualified to judge you in the first place. You've spent enough time in that midnight kitchen, exhausted by explanations nobody needed. You've given enough energy to people who didn't value it. You've justified yourself to people who were never going to be satisfied. It's time to come home to yourself, to remember that your life is yours, that your choices are valid not because you can explain them well, but because they're yours to make, that your peace doesn't require anyone else's permission or understanding. You are about to become someone who no longer explains. And that person is free. You know what freedom looks like. You've imagined it 1,000 times. But right now, you're sitting with your phone in your hand, staring at a text message you've rewritten 7 times, and freedom feels like something that happens to other people. The message is simple. You're declining an invitation. That's it. That's all it needs to be. But you can't just say no. You've tried. You typed it out. I won't be able to make it. Delete. I can't come. Delete. I'm going to pass on this one. Delete. Each version feels too harsh, too cold, too likely to invite questions you don't want to answer. So you keep adding. You add a reason, then you add context for the reason. Then you add an apology. Then you add reassurance that you still care about them. Then you read it back and it sounds desperate, so you delete half of it and start over. By the time you finally hit send, 20 minutes have passed. 20 minutes of your life spent crafting a response to a simple question. And even after you send it, you're not done. You're waiting, watching, hoping they don't respond with, "Why?" or "Are you sure?" or "Is everything okay?" Because if they do, you'll have to explain again. And you're already exhausted. This is your life. This is what over-explanation looks like when it becomes the air you breathe. It's the conversation you have with yourself on the drive home, rehearsing what you're going to say when you walk through the door. Your partner is going to ask about your day. It's a normal question, a kind question. But you've learned that normal questions can turn into interrogations if you're not careful. So you practice, you edit, you prepare your tone, your words, your facial expressions. You're directing a play where you're the only actor, and the reviews determine whether you get to have peace tonight. It's the family dinner where someone asks about your job, your relationship, your choices, and suddenly you're delivering a TED talk you didn't prepare for. You hear yourself over-explaining. You can feel it happening. The words keep coming, piling on top of each other, each sentence trying to preempt the next question, the next judgment, the next well-meaning concern that feels like an accusation. You see their eyes glaze over. They stopped listening 3 sentences ago. But you can't stop. Because stopping feels like leaving yourself undefended. It's the work meeting where you present an idea and someone asks a clarifying question, and instead of just answering it, you launch into a defensive monologue about your process, your research, your qualifications to even have this idea. You hear yourself doing it. You sound insecure. You know you sound insecure. But the alternative, just stating your idea and letting it stand, feels like standing naked in a room full of critics. This pattern isn't confined to one area of your life. It's everywhere. It's in every relationship, every interaction, every moment where someone's opinion of you feels like it matters more than your opinion of yourself. Look at your romantic relationships. You've learned that feelings require justification. You can't just say you're hurt. You have to explain why you're hurt, provide evidence that you're hurt is reasonable, Prove that you're not being too sensitive, or overreacting, or making a big deal out of nothing. You can't just say you need space. You have to give a detailed account of why you need it, when you'll be done needing it, and multiple reassurances that needing it doesn't mean you're leaving. Your partner asks, "What's wrong?" And that simple question triggers a cascade of anxiety in your nervous system. Because I'm upset isn't enough. It's never been enough. They're going to ask why. And you're going to have to build a case. You're going to have to demonstrate that your emotions are valid, that you have good reasons for feeling the way you feel, that you're not just being difficult or dramatic or impossible to please. So you explain. You give them your reasoning. You walk them through your thought process. You justify your emotions like you're defending a thesis. And even as you're doing it, part of you knows this isn't how it's supposed to work. Part of you knows that love shouldn't feel like a debate. But the other part, the louder part, is terrified of what happens if you stop explaining. What if they don't understand? What if they think you're wrong? What if your feelings aren't enough on their own? Now look at your family. The people who've known you the longest. The people who watched you grow up. You'd think they'd trust you by now. You'd think they'd respect your judgment, your autonomy, your right to make your own choices. But they don't. Or maybe they do, and they just express it in ways that require you to constantly defend yourself. You tell them you're making a change, moving to a new city, ending a relationship, starting a business, choosing a different path than the one they expected. And immediately, the questions come. Not curious questions, not supportive questions, questions that sound like cross-examination. Why would you do that? Are you sure you've thought this through? What about this consequence you clearly haven't considered? Don't you think you should wait? Have you talked to anyone about this? And you find yourself explaining, justifying, building your case, trying to prove that you're not making a mistake, that you're not being impulsive, that you're a competent adult who's capable of making decisions about your own life. You list your reasons, you cite your research, you anticipate their objections and address them before they can voice them. You perform competence and certainty even when you feel neither. Because admitting doubt means inviting more questions. Admitting fear means opening yourself up to being talked out of something you've already decided. And when it's over, when you've finally satisfied their need to understand, you're depleted. You've spent all this energy trying to get them to approve of a choice that was never theirs to make. And the worst part? They still might not approve. They might still think you're wrong. And you'll have given them all that explanation for nothing. At work, it's different, but somehow the same. You're competent. You know you're competent. You've proven it over and over. But you still feel like you're one question away from being exposed as someone who doesn't belong here. Someone questions your decision. A colleague, a manager. It doesn't matter. The question feels like a challenge, and challenges require defense. So you explain. You walk them through your entire thought process. You show your work. You justify your approach. You demonstrate that you've considered every angle, anticipated every outcome, done your due diligence. But here's the thing. They didn't ask for all of that. They asked one question, a simple question, and you turned it into an oral defense of your competence, your intelligence, your right to be here. And now they're looking at you differently, not because your idea was bad, but because your explanation made you seem uncertain, insecure, like someone who doesn't trust their own judgment. The irony is brutal. You over-explain because you want to be understood. But over-explaining makes you harder to understand. It buries your actual point under layers of justification and defense. It makes people question whether you really believe what you're saying, because if you did, why would you need to convince them so hard? This is the cage you've built, word by word, explanation by explanation, justification by justification. And it's not just exhausting, it's changing who you are. You can feel it in your body, the tightness in your chest that appears the moment someone asks you a question, the knot in your stomach when you have to set a boundary, the tension in your shoulders that never quite releases because you're always braced for the next interrogation. You can feel it in your sleep, or your lack of sleep, because you lie awake replaying conversations, wondering if you explained yourself clearly, worrying that they misunderstood, crafting better explanations for next time. Your mind won't let you rest because there's always one more thing you should have said, one more point you should have made, one more way you could have been clearer. You can feel it in your relationships, the distance that grows when people realize that every interaction with you requires emotional labor. The way friends stop asking you questions because they know they're going to get a dissertation instead of an answer. The way your partner looks exhausted before conversations even begin, because they know you're going to turn everything into a negotiation that requires extensive documentation. You can feel it in your self-trust, or the erosion of it, because when you constantly explain yourself to others, you're sending yourself a message. The message is, my choices aren't valid until someone else agrees with them. My feelings aren't real until I can prove they're justified. My boundaries aren't legitimate until I can defend them in court. And that message, it's destroying you from the inside out. You've become someone who can't make a simple decision without consulting an invisible jury. Someone who rehearses conversations that haven't happened yet. Someone who carries the weight of other people's potential misunderstanding like a backpack full of rocks. You've become someone who's more concerned with being understood than with being true. More invested in managing other people's perceptions than in honoring your own reality. More committed to explaining yourself than to trusting yourself. And the cruelest part? It doesn't even work. All that explaining, all that justifying, all that defending, and people still don't understand. Or they understand and they disagree anyway. Or they understand and they don't care. Or they never actually wanted to understand in the first place. They just wanted you to doubt yourself. You've given away so much energy to this pattern. So much time. So much of yourself. And what have you gotten in return? Not peace. Not respect. Not deeper relationships or better understanding or the approval you've been seeking. Just exhaustion. Just the constant low-grade anxiety of wondering if you said enough. If you were clear enough. If they finally get it. Just the tightness in your chest. The sleepless nights. The rehearsed speeches. The rewritten text messages. The defensive monologues. The endless justifications for choices that were always yours to make. This is what over-explanation costs. This is the price you pay when you believe that your worth is measured by how well you can defend your existence. But here's what you need to understand. This cage you're in, you built it. And that means you can unbuild it. You can learn to say no without a supporting essay. You can learn to make choices without seeking approval. You can learn to set boundaries without defending them like a dissertation. You can learn that your peace is not something you have to argue for, that your feelings don't need justification, that your life is yours to live, not yours to explain. But first, you need to understand where this pattern came from. You need to see the roots before you can pull them out, because this didn't start with you. This was taught to you, and what was learned can be unlearned. You didn't wake up one day and decide to become someone who over-explains everything. This pattern didn't appear out of nowhere. It has roots, deep ones, and if you want to pull them out, you need to see where they began. So let's go back before the rewritten text messages, before the rehearsed conversations, before the midnight anxiety spirals, back to when you were small, when you were learning what it meant to be a person in this world. You're 5 years old, maybe 6. You're at the dinner table, and you don't want to eat what's on your plate. It's not about being difficult. It's not about defiance. You're just not hungry, or you don't like the taste, or your stomach feels funny. You don't have the words for it yet, but your body knows. So you say the only thing that makes sense to you. I don't want to. And the adult across from you, parent, grandparent, caregiver, doesn't say, okay. They don't respect your no. Instead, they ask the question that will echo through your entire life. Why not? You're 5 years old. You don't have a thesis prepared. You don't understand that you're supposed to justify your internal experience. So you say something simple. I just don't want to. And that's when you learn the first lesson. That's not enough. Your feeling, by itself, isn't sufficient. Your no, without reasoning, isn't valid. You need to provide evidence. You need to build a case. You need to prove that your discomfort is legitimate before anyone will honor it. Maybe they push back. That's not a good reason. Maybe they dismiss you. You're being picky. Maybe they override you entirely. You'll eat it anyway. Or maybe they do something more insidious. They teach you that love is conditional on compliance. If you loved me, you'd eat what I made for you. And there it is, the seed, the beginning of the belief that your worth is measured by how well you can justify your existence. You learn quickly. Children always do. You learn that no isn't a complete sentence. You learn that your feelings need footnotes. You learn that saying, I don't want to, makes you difficult, ungrateful, disrespectful. So you start explaining. You start justifying. You start building cases for why your internal experience should be respected. And sometimes, if your explanation is good enough, if your reasoning is sound enough, if you perform understanding of their perspective while defending your own, they let you have your boundary. They let you say no, not because you have an inherent right to choose, but because you argued your case well enough to earn that right. This becomes your template. This is how you learn the world works. Authority figures don't respect your autonomy. They require justification for it. Your feelings aren't valid on their own. They need to be defended. Your choices aren't yours to make freely. They need to be approved. Now you're 10, 12, a teenager. The pattern has deepened. It's not just about food anymore. It's about everything. You don't want to hug someone. Why not? Don't be rude. You don't want to go to an event. Give me one good reason. You don't want to share something personal. If you don't have anything to hide, why won't you tell me? You don't want to continue a conversation. You're being disrespectful. I'm your parent, and I deserve an explanation. Notice the language. I deserve an explanation, as if your internal world is something you owe them, as if access to your feelings, your thoughts, your reasons is rent you pay for taking up space in their home, in their life, in the world. And if you don't explain, if you hold firm on your simple no, there are consequences, disappointment, guilt trips, withdrawal of affection, labels, difficult, secretive, disrespectful, ungrateful, cold. So you learn to explain, not because you want to, because it's safer than the alternative, because explanation becomes the currency you trade for basic respect, because justifying yourself is how you avoid rejection, anger, punishment, the silent treatment, the lecture about how much they've sacrificed for you, and this is how you repay them. This isn't about individual parents or specific families. This is cultural. This is systemic. This is the water we all swim in. You're taught that politeness requires elaboration, that declining an invitation without a detailed excuse is rude, that saying, "I'd rather not," makes you selfish, that boundaries without extensive justification are hostile acts. You watch the adults around you do it too. Your mother explaining to your father why she needs an afternoon alone. Your father justifying to your mother why he made a decision. Your relatives defending their choices to each other, building cases, proving their reasoning was sound. Nobody just says no and lets it stand, because no, by itself, is treated like an act of aggression that requires de-escalation through explanation. You learn the scripts. "I'm sorry I can't," becomes your default. Not "I can't," not "I'm not available," but "I'm sorry I can't because," followed by a list of reasons that demonstrate you're not just declining. You're declining for acceptable, understandable, justifiable reasons that no reasonable person could argue with. And if someone does argue with your reasons, if they poke holes in your justification, then you haven't earned your no. Then you have to either strengthen your case or surrender your boundary. This is what you're taught. This is the operating system that gets installed in your developing brain, and it runs deeper than you realize. Let's talk about what's happening in your neuroscience. Because this isn't just psychological. This is biological. Your brain learned something fundamental about survival, and it's been protecting you with that knowledge ever since. Your amygdala, the part of your brain that processes threat and fear, fires when you perceive social rejection. To your nervous system, social rejection isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. For our ancestors, being rejected from the tribe meant death. Isolation meant you couldn't survive. So your brain evolved to treat social rejection as a threat on par with physical danger. When you're young and you say no without justification, and you face anger, disappointment, withdrawal of love, your amygdala registers that as danger. Your nervous system floods with stress hormones. Your body goes into a state of activation. And your brain does what it's designed to do. It looks for a way to make the danger stop, and it finds one. Explanation. When you explain yourself, when you justify your boundary, when you build your case, the anger softens, the disappointment eases, the love returns, the danger passes. Your brain takes notes. It creates a neural pathway, a pattern, a rule for survival. Explanation equals safety. Justification prevents rejection. The more thoroughly you defend yourself, the less likely you are to be abandoned. This becomes automatic. This becomes your nervous system's default response to any situation where someone might not understand you, might not approve of you, might not be happy with your choices. Your amygdala fires. Your body floods with stress hormones. And before you even consciously think about it, you're explaining, you're justifying, you're defending. Because your nervous system learned a long time ago that this is how you survive. And here's the devastating part. Your nervous system can't tell the difference between actual danger and perceived danger. It can't tell the difference between a genuine threat to your survival and someone being slightly disappointed that you can't make it to their party. So it treats everything like a threat, every boundary you set, every no you say, every choice you make that might result in someone's confusion or disappointment or disagreement. Your nervous system sounds the alarm, and you respond the only way you know how. You explain. Now layer on top of this the psychological truth that you absorbed, that your worth is conditional, that you have to earn your right to have boundaries, that you're only deserving of respect if you can prove your reasoning is sound. This belief didn't come from one incident. It came from thousands of micro-moments. Every time an adult dismissed your feelings without hearing them, every time you had to argue for basic autonomy, every time your no was treated like an opening argument instead of a complete sentence, every time you were told you were being too sensitive, too difficult, too much, not enough. You learned that who you are, as you are, isn't acceptable. You learned that your value is measured by your ability to meet other people's expectations, to manage their emotions, to make your internal experience palatable and understandable to them. You learned that your existence requires justification, and you believed it. Of course you believed it. You were a child. Children believe what the world teaches them, especially when the world teaches the same lesson over and over and over again. But here's what you need to understand now, from this vantage point, with the wisdom you've gained. You weren't weak. You weren't broken. You weren't defective. You were adapting. You were surviving. You were doing exactly what you needed to do to navigate systems that didn't honor your inherent right to choose. The adults in your life might have loved you. They probably did. But love doesn't undo programming. Love doesn't automatically create respect for a child's autonomy. Many of them were operating from their own wounds, their own conditioning, their own learned patterns about what children owe adults, what respect looks like, what obedience requires. They probably believed they were teaching you to be considerate, to think of others, to not be selfish. They probably didn't realize they were teaching you that your internal experience doesn't matter unless you can defend it, that your feelings aren't real unless someone else validates them, that your choices aren't yours unless someone else approves them. And the culture reinforced it. Everywhere you looked, you saw the same message. Be polite. Don't make waves. Consider other people's feelings. Put others first. Don't be difficult. Don't be demanding. Don't be too much. Notice what's missing from those messages. Trust yourself. Honor your feelings. Protect your energy. Your no is enough. You don't owe anyone access to your internal world. Those messages weren't there. Because the culture that raised you wasn't designed to create autonomous, boundaried individuals. It was designed to create compliant, manageable people who prioritize social harmony over personal truth. And it worked. Look at you. Look at how thoroughly you learned the lesson. Look at how automatically you explain, justify, defend. Look at how uncomfortable you feel when you imagine saying no without providing reasons. Look at how your nervous system reacts to the mere thought of disappointing someone. This is deep programming. This is wiring that's been reinforced for decades. This is a survival strategy that your brain believes is keeping you alive. But here's the truth. Your nervous system doesn't know yet. You're not 5 years old anymore. You're not dependent on those authority figures for survival. You're not powerless in the face of someone's disappointment or confusion or disagreement. You're an adult. and the rules are different now. Or they can be, if you choose to rewrite them. The people in your life now, they're not the adults from your childhood. They don't have power over your survival. Their approval is not required for you to have food, shelter, safety, belonging. Their understanding of your choices is not a prerequisite for you to make those choices. And if they treat your boundaries like something that requires extensive justification, if they demand explanations for your feelings, if they make you defend your right to say no, then they're operating from the same broken programming you are. They're repeating the same patterns that were taught to them, but you don't have to participate. You don't have to keep playing by rules that were designed to keep you small, compliant, and constantly seeking permission to exist. You can learn a new way. You can rewire the patterns. You can teach your nervous system that explanation doesn't equal safety, that you can say no and survive the discomfort that follows, that other people's confusion about your boundaries is not your emergency. But first, you have to stop treating this pattern like a personal failing. You have to stop being ashamed of how thoroughly you explain yourself, because shame won't help you change. Shame will just make you defend yourself harder, explain yourself more, justify even your attempts to stop justifying. What happened to you wasn't your fault. The programming you received wasn't chosen. The survival strategies you developed were intelligent responses to environments that didn't respect your autonomy. You learned to over-explain because it was the smartest thing you could do with the information you had. You adapted. You survived. You found a way to get your needs met, even if that way required you to constantly defend your right to have needs in the first place. That was survival. That was intelligence. That was resilience. But what got you through childhood is not what will set you free as an adult. The strategies that protected you then are the cage that confines you now. The programming that helped you survive is the pattern that's exhausting you. And now that you can see it, now that you can trace it back to its roots, you can choose something different. You can honor what that pattern did for you, and still decide it's time to let it go. You can thank your younger self for learning to explain, to justify, to defend, for becoming so skilled at managing other people's reactions that you kept yourself safe in environments that didn't make safety easy. And then you can tell that younger self something they never got to hear. Your no is enough. Your feelings are valid without justification. You don't have to earn your right to choose. You never did. The journey from where you are to where you want to be isn't a straight line. It's not a switch you flip. It's not about waking up one morning and suddenly being someone who never over-explains anything ever again. It's a spectrum, a progression, a series of stages you move through, sometimes forward, sometimes backward, sometimes staying in one place for a while before you're ready to move on. Understanding these stages changes everything, because when you can see where you are, you can stop beating yourself up for not being further along. You can celebrate the progress you've made instead of only seeing how far you still have to go. You can recognize that growth isn't linear, and that's okay. That's normal. That's how transformation actually works. So let's map this journey. Let's look at the 4 stages, from justification to liberation. Not so you can judge yourself, but so you can see yourself clearly, so you can know where you are and what comes next. This is the explanation spectrum, and wherever you are on it right now is exactly where you're supposed to be. Stage 1 is where most of us start. This is the chronic explainer. This is you before you even realized there was a problem, before you understood that over-explanation was something you were doing, not just something that happened to you. In this stage, you explain everything to everyone, even when no one asked, especially when no one asked, because the explanation isn't really for them. It's for you. It's the way you manage the anxiety that lives in your chest, the fear that if you don't justify yourself thoroughly enough, something bad will happen. Your decisions come wrapped in defensive paragraphs. You can't just say you're taking a new job. You have to explain the entire decision-making process, the research you did, the conversations you had, the pros and cons list, the way this aligns with your long-term goals, the reasons the old job wasn't working, the specific benefits of the new one. You give people a full presentation when all they asked was, "How's work going?" You do this with small things, too. You can't just order what you want at a restaurant. You have to justify it. I know the pasta sounds good, but I had Italian yesterday, and I'm trying to eat more vegetables, so I think I'll get the salad, even though I'm not usually a salad person, but this one has chicken, so it's filling. The server didn't need any of that. They just needed to know what you wanted. But you couldn't just say it. You had to explain it. In this stage, you feel responsible for other people's understanding and comfort with your choices. When you make a decision, you're not just thinking about whether it's right for you. You're thinking about how everyone else is going to react, how you're going to explain it to your parents, how you're going to justify it to your friends, how you're going to defend it to anyone who might question it. You carry this responsibility like a weight. Other people's confusion feels like your failure. Their disappointment feels like your fault. Their discomfort with your boundaries feels like something you caused, and therefore something you need to fix. In your body, this stage feels like constant tension. Your shoulders are tight, your jaw is clenched. There's a heaviness in your chest that you've learned to live with. You're always slightly on edge, always braced for the next question, the next challenge, the next moment when you'll have to defend yourself. In relationships, you're exhausting. Not because you're a bad person, but because every interaction requires so much energy. You can't have a simple conversation. Everything becomes a negotiation, a defense, an explanation. People start to avoid certain topics with you because they know you're going to turn a simple question into a 30-minute monologue. In daily decisions, you're paralyzed because every choice requires justification, and justification requires certainty, and you're not certain about anything. So you either avoid making decisions altogether, or you make them and then spend days defending them to yourself and everyone else. This is stage 1. And if you're here, that's okay. Everyone starts here. The fact that you're reading this, that you're becoming aware of the pattern, means you're already beginning to move. Stage 2 is the selective defender. This is where awareness begins to change behavior, but the change isn't consistent yet. This is where you start to notice what you're doing, even if you can't always stop yourself from doing it. In this stage, you've started to see the pattern. You recognize when you're over-explaining. Sometimes you catch yourself mid-explanation and stop. Sometimes you craft a text message full of justifications and then delete half of it before sending. Sometimes you rehearse a conversation in your head and realize you're doing it again. You can hold back explanations with strangers. The cashier at the grocery store doesn't need to know why you're buying ice cream at 9 in the morning. The person who invited you to their party doesn't need a detailed breakdown of your schedule when you decline. You're starting to understand that most people don't actually want or need all the information you're used to giving them. But you still crack under pressure from those close to you. Your partner asks why you're upset, and you can't just say, "I need some time to process." You have to explain. Your parent questions your decision, and you can't just say, "This is what I have chosen." You have to defend. Your best friend doesn't understand your boundary, and you can't just hold firm. You have to justify. The people who know you best are the ones who've trained you most thoroughly. They've learned that if they push, you'll explain. If they question, you'll defend. If they express confusion or disappointment, you'll rush to fix it with words. So they keep pushing. Not because they're bad people, but because the dynamic you've built together requires your constant explanation, and changing that dynamic is uncomfortable for everyone involved. In this stage, you're building awareness, but not yet consistent boundaries. You have good days and bad days, moments where you hold firm, and moments where you collapse back into old patterns. You feel like you're making progress, and then something happens, and you're right back where you started, explaining yourself like your life depends on it. In your body, this stage feels unstable. Sometimes you feel strong, grounded, capable of saying no without justification. Other times you feel like you're barely holding it together, like one question will break your resolve and send you spiraling back into defensive explanation. In relationships, things are shifting. Some people are adjusting to the new you, the one who doesn't always explain everything. Other people are pushing back, confused or frustrated by the change. You're learning who respects your growth and who feels threatened by it. In daily decisions, you're gaining confidence, slowly, unevenly. But you're starting to trust yourself more. Starting to believe that your choices don't require anyone else's approval. Starting to understand that you can make a decision and let it stand without defending it to everyone who has an opinion. This is stage 2, and if you're here, you're doing the hard work. You're in the messy middle, the place where change is happening but hasn't solidified yet. Stay here. Keep practicing. The consistency will come. Stage 3 is the calm decliner. This is where the new patterns start to feel natural, where you're not constantly fighting against your conditioning, where saying no without explanation doesn't require all your strength. In this stage, you can say no. You can set boundaries. You can make choices without lengthy justification. Not perfectly. Not every time. But most of the time. Consistently enough that it's becoming part of who you are, instead of something you have to force yourself to do. You still feel the pull to explain. Your nervous system still sends you the signal that explanation equals safety. But now you recognize the signal for what it is. An old pattern, an outdated survival strategy, and you can acknowledge it without obeying it. Someone asks why you can't come to their event. You feel the familiar urge to list all your reasons, to prove that you're not just declining because you don't want to come. But you don't. You take a breath. You say, "I won't be able to make it, but thank you for thinking of me." And then you sit with the discomfort of not explaining. You feel it. You survive it. And it passes. Your energy is increasingly your own. You're not spending it on people who don't value it. You're not giving it away in long explanations to people who were never going to understand anyway. You're keeping it, using it for things that matter, for people who respect your boundaries without requiring you to defend them. In this stage, you've learned something crucial. Most people don't actually need your explanations. They accept your no at face value. And the ones who don't? the ones who push back, who demand reasons, who treat your boundary like an opening argument. They're showing you who they are, and you're starting to believe them. In your body, this stage feels lighter. The constant tension is easing. You still have moments of anxiety when you set a boundary, but they don't consume you the way they used to. Your chest doesn't tighten every time someone asks you a question. Your jaw isn't perpetually clenched. You're breathing deeper, sleeping better. You're reclaiming space in your own body. In relationships, you're noticing a shift. The people who truly care about you are respecting your boundaries. They're not demanding explanations. They're trusting your judgment. They're saying okay when you say no. And it's revealing how rare that used to be. How many relationships were built on your constant justification. How many people stayed in your life because you made it easy for them by never requiring them to respect you. Some relationships are deepening in this stage. The ones where mutual respect was always there but got buried under your pattern of over-explanation. Now that you're not constantly defending yourself, there's room for real connection, real conversation, real intimacy that doesn't require you to perform or prove or justify. Other relationships are ending, or changing so fundamentally they barely resemble what they were, because they were built on a foundation of you explaining and them demanding. And when you stop explaining, the foundation crumbles. It hurts, but it also clarifies. It shows you who was really there for you, and who was there for the version of you that never said no without a 10-page justification. In daily decisions, you're experiencing something you haven't felt in years, maybe ever. Freedom. You can make a choice and move on. You don't have to rehearse conversations about it. You don't have to prepare your defense. You don't have to manage everyone's reactions. You can just choose and let the choice speak for itself. This is stage 3, and if you're here, you've done something remarkable. You've rewired patterns that have been running your life for decades. You've taught your nervous system a new way of being. You've proven to yourself that you can say no, survive the discomfort, and come out the other side still intact, still worthy, still whole. But there's one more stage, one more level of mastery, and it's where all of this has been leading. Stage 4 is the unapologetic presence. This is liberation. This is freedom. This is what it feels like when you finally, fully believe that your peace is not up for debate. In this stage, your peace is non-negotiable, not because you're rigid or cold or unwilling to communicate, but because you understand, in your bones, that your boundaries are not something you need to defend. They're something you state and uphold, period. You understand that people's confusion about your boundaries is not your emergency. Someone doesn't understand why you're making the choice you're making. That's okay. They don't need to understand. Their understanding is not required for your choice to be valid. Their approval is not a prerequisite for you to move forward. You can sit comfortably in another person's disappointment without rushing to fix it with words. They're disappointed you can't come to their event. They're confused about your decision. They're hurt by your boundary. And you can hold space for their feelings without making their feelings your responsibility. You can be compassionate without being compliant. You can care about them without managing their emotions for them. In this stage, you are free. Free from the constant mental load of explaining yourself. Free from the anxiety of wondering if you said enough. Free from the exhaustion of defending choices that were always yours to make. Free from the belief that you owe anyone access to your reasoning. In your body, this stage feels like peace, not the absence of challenge or discomfort, but a deep, settled knowing that you're okay, that you can handle whatever comes, that you don't need to brace yourself against every interaction. Your nervous system has finally learned that you're safe, that saying no won't kill you, that disappointing someone won't destroy you, that you can be misunderstood and still be whole. In relationships, this stage brings clarity. The right people are here, the ones who respect you without requiring you to earn that respect, the ones who trust your judgment, the ones who say okay when you say no, the ones who don't treat your boundaries like puzzles they need to solve. And the wrong people, they've either adapted or left, because you're not available for relationships that require constant justification anymore. You're not interested in connections that drain your energy through endless explanation. You've learned that love doesn't demand defense. Respect doesn't require a thesis, and anyone who needs you to constantly prove your worth doesn't actually value it. In daily decisions, you move through life with a quiet confidence that would have seemed impossible when you were in stage 1. You make choices. You state them if necessary. You move on. You don't carry them around like burdens that need constant justification. You trust yourself, and that trust is the foundation of everything. This is stage 4. This is where you're headed, and you'll know you're here when saying no without explanation feels natural, when someone's confusion doesn't send you into panic, when you can disappoint someone and still sleep peacefully that night, when your energy is yours and you protect it without guilt. You might not be here yet. That's okay. This is the destination, not the starting point. But knowing it exists, knowing it's possible, knowing that other people have made this journey and so can you, that changes everything. Wherever you are on this spectrum right now is exactly where you need to be. Honor that, and then take the next step. Because freedom is waiting, and it's closer than you think. You know where you are going now. You can see the stages, you understand the journey, but knowing the destination doesn't tell you how to take the next step. You need a tool, something practical, something you can use today, right now, in the next conversation that requires you to set a boundary. This is that tool. This is the method that will change everything if you actually use it. It's simple, almost too simple. Your brain might tell you it can't possibly work, but simplicity is the point. Complexity is what got you trapped in the first place. This is the 3-part boundary statement, and it works because it gives you a structure to follow when your nervous system is screaming at you to explain, justify, defend. When every instinct you have is telling you that your simple no isn't enough, this formula reminds you that it is. Part 1 is the foundation. State your position clearly and simply. That's it. Not your position, plus 3 paragraphs of reasoning. Not your position wrapped in apologies and justifications. Just your position. Clear, simple, complete. I won't be able to make it. I'm not comfortable with that. I've decided to take a different approach. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available. I've changed my mind. No, thank you. Notice what's not there. No because. No explanation of your schedule, your feelings, your reasoning, your process. Just the statement of your boundary. Your choice. Your decision. This will feel wrong at first. Your brain will panic. It will tell you that you're being rude, cold, harsh, unkind. It will remind you of all the times you were taught that a boundary without explanation is an insult. It will flood you with anxiety about what the other person is thinking, feeling, assuming about you. That's normal. That's your conditioning talking. That's the old programming, trying to keep you safe, using strategies that no longer serve you. Acknowledge it. And do it anyway. State your position clearly and simply. Then move to part 2. Part 2 is where most people fail, because part 2 is where you do nothing. Part 2 is silence. Space. The gap between your statement and whatever comes next. And that gap feels unbearable when you're used to filling every silence with explanation. Resist the urge to fill the silence that follows. Count to 5 in your head. Breathe. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice the air moving in and out of your lungs. Let the space exist. This is crucial. This is where you prove to your nervous system that silence is not dangerous, that you can state a boundary and not immediately rush to defend it, that other people's reactions are not your emergency. 5 seconds, that's all you need. 5 seconds of breathing through the discomfort instead of talking your way out of it. 5 seconds of trusting that your simple statement was enough. 5 seconds of letting the other person sit with your boundary before you do anything else. Those 5 seconds will feel like 5 hours. Your heart will race. Your palms will sweat. Your mind will offer you 1,000 better ways you could have said it. 1,000 reasons you should add. 1,000 justifications that would make this easier. Ignore all of it. Count to 5. Breathe. Let the space exist. Most of the time, that's all you'll need. Most people will accept your boundary. They'll say, okay. They'll move on. They'll respect your no without requiring you to defend it. And you'll realize that all those explanations you've been giving for years were never actually necessary. You were giving them to manage your own anxiety, not because anyone actually needed them. But sometimes someone will push back. They'll ask why. They'll express confusion. They'll try to negotiate. They'll tell you that you're being unreasonable. They'll ask for more information, more clarity, more justification. That's when you move to part 3. Part 3 is the redirect, not an explanation, not a justification, a redirect, a statement that acknowledges their response while holding your boundary firm. I appreciate your concern, and this is what works for me. I understand you see it differently. I've given it thought, and I'm settled on this. I hear you, and my answer is still no. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear, and it's still my decision. Notice the structure. Acknowledgement plus boundary. Not acknowledgement plus justification. You're not being dismissive. You're not being cold. You're recognizing that they have feelings about your choice, while making it clear that their feelings don't change your choice. This is kind. This is respectful. And it's also firm. You're not debating. You're not negotiating. You're not opening the door for them to convince you. You're stating a fact. This is my boundary. This is my decision. And it stands. If they push again, you repeat. Same energy. Same calm. Same firmness. I understand. And this is still my answer. You become a broken record, not because you're being stubborn, but because you're refusing to participate in a negotiation about something that's not negotiable. Let's see what this looks like in real situations. Because theory is one thing, application is where you'll actually feel the power of this method. You get an invitation to an event you don't want to attend. Your old pattern would be to write a paragraph explaining your schedule, your energy levels, your other commitments, your reasons for declining. Your new approach is different. Thank you for the invitation. I won't be able to make it. That's it. You send it. You feel the urge to add more. You don't. You breathe. You count to 5. You let it be. They might respond with, no problem. Hope to see you next time. Done. Boundary set. Energy preserved. No explanation required. Or they might respond with, "Why not? Is everything okay?" Now you redirect. "Everything's fine. It just doesn't work with my schedule. Hope you have a great time." Notice you still didn't explain. You acknowledged their question. You gave a simple response. You held your boundary. And you redirected the focus back to them having a good time. Now a harder one. You're ending a relationship. Romantic. Friendship doesn't matter. The old you would prepare a speech. You'd list all the reasons. You'd build a case for why this relationship isn't working. You'd try to make them understand so thoroughly that they couldn't possibly be hurt or confused. The new you knows that's impossible. Someone is going to be hurt. Someone is going to be confused. And that's not something you can fix with the perfect explanation. I've decided this relationship isn't working for me anymore. I know this is hard to hear, and it's what I need to do. They're going to ask why. Of course they are. They're going to want reasons, details, explanations. They're going to want to understand what went wrong so they can fix it, change it, convince you to stay. And you're going to redirect. I know you want to understand, and I've made my decision. I care about you, and this is what's right for me. If they push harder, if they get angry or hurt or desperate, you repeat. I hear how painful this is. My decision stands. You're not being cruel. You're being clear. You're not withholding information to punish them. You're protecting your energy and refusing to participate in a conversation that will only drain both of you further. Because explaining won't make them hurt less. It will just give them things to argue with, to try to fix, to use as ammunition to change your mind. Here's a work scenario. Your boss asks you to take on a project that's outside your role. The old you would either say yes while resenting it, or say no while providing a detailed explanation of your workload, your priorities, your capacity, your reasoning. The new you says, "I'm not able to take that on right now." Your boss asks why not. They list reasons why you should. They express disappointment or frustration, and you redirect. I understand this is important. I've looked at my current workload, and I don't have capacity for this project without dropping other priorities. If you'd like me to take this on, we can discuss what I should deprioritize. You're still not justifying. You're stating facts. You're offering a solution. You're making it clear that your boundary has reasons, even if you're not listing all of them. And you're putting the decision back on them. One more. Family expectations. Your parent asks when you're going to have children, get married, change careers, move closer to home. Whatever expectation they've decided you should meet. The old you would either defend your choices for 20 minutes or avoid the question by changing the subject. The new you has a different option. I'm not discussing that right now. They push. They always do. They say they're just concerned. They say they have a right to know. They say you're being secretive or defensive, and you redirect. I appreciate your concern. This is something I'll share when I'm ready, and I'm not ready now. They might get upset. They might accuse you of shutting them out. They might try guilt, manipulation, or anger to get you to open up, and you hold firm. I know this isn't the answer you want. It's the answer I'm giving. Here's what happens when you use this method consistently. You feel immediate relief. Because you stop offering your energy as currency for other people's approval. You stop performing. You stop defending. You stop exhausting yourself, trying to make everyone understand and agree with every choice you make. You realize that brevity is both kind and powerful. Kind, because you're not wasting anyone's time with explanations they don't actually need. Powerful, because you're claiming your right to make choices without requiring anyone else's permission or understanding. You discover that most people respect simple boundaries more than they respect explained boundaries, because simple boundaries communicate confidence, self-trust, clarity, while explained boundaries often communicate doubt, insecurity, a willingness to negotiate. You learn that the people who genuinely care about you will honor your no without demanding to know why. And the people who don't? They reveal themselves quickly. They're the ones who keep pushing, who treat your boundary like a challenge, who can't accept your decision until they understand every detail of your reasoning. And that information is valuable because it shows you who's safe, who respects your autonomy, who trusts your judgment, and who doesn't. This method is simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. You're going to mess it up. You're going to forget and fall back into old patterns. You're going to set a boundary and then immediately start explaining it before you realize what you're doing. That's okay. That's part of the process. Notice it. Don't shame yourself for it. And try again next time. Because every time you use this formula, you're rewiring your brain. You're teaching your nervous system that you can state a boundary, sit in the discomfort, and survive. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. Your peace is not a debate. Your boundaries are not negotiable. And your decisions don't require anyone's approval but your own. State your position. Breathe through the silence. Redirect if necessary. That's it. That's the formula. And it works. Not because it's magic, but because it's true. The three-part boundary statement is your foundation. But life doesn't always present itself in neat scenarios where one tool is enough. Some situations require more nuance. Some people require different strategies. Some moments call for approaches that the basic method can't quite address. This is where you deepen your practice. This is where you learn to adapt, to layer techniques, to match your response to what's actually in front of you, instead of applying the same approach to every situation and hoping it works. These are the advanced tools, the reinforcements that turn a single skill into comprehensive mastery, the methods that help you navigate complexity without losing your center. Let's start with the gray rock technique. Because some people in your life aren't just asking questions, they're baiting you. They're trying to provoke a reaction, to get you engaged, to pull you into a dynamic where you are constantly defending yourself, and they're constantly finding holes in your defense. These are the manipulative personalities, the ones who treat your boundaries like challenges, the ones who ask questions not because they want to understand, but because they want to control, the ones who use your words against you, who twist your explanations, who make you feel like you're always one step behind in a game you didn't agree to play. With these people, the three-part boundary statement isn't enough, because they're not interested in respecting your boundary. They're interested in breaking it, and every word you give them is ammunition. This is where you become the gray rock. Uninteresting, unreactive, bland. Not because you're trying to be rude, but because you're refusing to give them the engagement they're seeking. They ask why you're making a choice. You say, it's just what I decided. They push for more. You say, there's not much to say about it. They try to provoke you. You stay neutral, calm, boring. You're not giving them anything to work with. No emotion to manipulate. No detailed explanation to pick apart. No reaction to escalate. You're a smooth stone. Nothing for them to grip onto. This feels counterintuitive. Your instinct is to defend yourself, to prove you're right, to make them see reason. But with manipulative personalities, that instinct is exactly what they're counting on. They want you engaged. They want you explaining, because as long as you're explaining, they have power over you. The grey rock technique takes that power away. It makes you uninteresting. And eventually, they move on to someone who'll give them the reaction they're seeking. Now let's talk about the broken record method. This is for situations where someone isn't necessarily manipulative, but they're persistent. They're not accepting your no. They keep asking the same question in different ways. They keep pushing, probing, trying to find the angle that will make you change your mind. This happens with well-meaning people too. Parents who can't accept that you're not coming home for the holidays. Friends who can't understand why you're not dating someone they think is perfect for you. Colleagues who keep asking you to take on work you've already declined. With these people, you need consistency, unwavering, calm, repetitive consistency. You become a broken record. You say the same thing over and over, in the same tone, with the same energy, until they finally accept that your answer isn't changing. "I've made my decision," they ask again. "I've made my decision." They try a different approach. "I've made my decision." They get frustrated. "I know this is frustrating, and I've made my decision." You're not getting pulled into their reasoning. You're not addressing their arguments. You're not trying to convince them. You're simply repeating your boundary until they understand that no amount of pushing is going to change it. This requires patience. It requires you to resist the urge to engage with their logic, to defend against their points, to prove your reasoning is sound. But every time you repeat yourself calmly, instead of escalating or explaining, you're reinforcing your boundary. You're teaching them that you mean what you say, that your no is final. Sometimes, though, you want to hold your boundary without creating distance. You want to be firm and warm at the same time. You want the person to know you care about them, even though you're not giving them what they want. This is where you use compassionate deflection. I hear how important this is to you, and it's not something I can do. I know you're disappointed, and this is what works for me. I care about you, and I need to take care of myself in this situation. You're acknowledging their feelings. You're showing that you see them, that you understand they're struggling with your boundary. But you're not letting their feelings change your boundary. You're holding both things at once: compassion and firmness, care and clarity. This is especially useful with people you love, people whose feelings matter to you. You can honor their disappointment without making it your responsibility to fix. You can care about their hurt without making their hurt more important than your need. Compassionate deflection is proof that boundaries aren't cold, that saying no doesn't mean you don't love someone, that protecting your energy can coexist with genuine warmth. You're not choosing between being kind and being boundaried. You're being both. Now let's talk about something that requires more self-reflection. The energy audit. This is the practice of identifying which relationships and situations drain you through explanation demands, and which honor your autonomy without requiring constant justification. You need to know this, because you can't protect your energy if you don't know where it's going. You can't set effective boundaries if you don't know which relationships require them most. So you audit, you pay attention. After interactions, you check in with yourself. How do you feel? Energized or depleted? Respected or interrogated? Seen or dismissed? Notice which people accept your boundaries easily, and which ones treat every boundary like a negotiation. Notice which situations require you to constantly explain yourself, and which ones let you just be. Notice which relationships feel spacious and which ones feel like you're always defending your right to exist. This isn't about judgment. This isn't about deciding that people who drain you are bad and people who honor you are good. It's about information, data, clarity about where your energy is going so you can make conscious choices about how to proceed. Maybe you realize that every conversation with a certain family member requires you to defend your life choices. That's valuable information. Maybe you notice that one friend always accepts your no without question, while another always pushes back. That tells you something. Once you have this information, you can adjust. You can limit time with people who drain you. You can deepen relationships with people who respect you. You can prepare yourself before interactions you know will be challenging. You can stop being surprised when certain people demand explanations, because you'll see the pattern clearly. The energy audit gives you clarity, and clarity gives you power. Here's another tool that changes everything once you understand it. The story you don't tell. This is the practice of recognizing that you can hold your full truth without offering it to people who haven't earned it. You have reasons for your choices, good reasons, deep reasons, reasons that make perfect sense when you examine them. But not everyone deserves access to those reasons. Not everyone has earned the right to your full story. This is hard to accept when you've been taught that withholding information is the same as lying, when you've been conditioned to believe that if you have a good reason, you should share it, when you've learned that transparency equals honesty and privacy equals secrecy. But that's not true. You can be honest and still private. You can have a complete story and still only share the parts that feel right to share with each person. You can know your truth fully while recognizing that not everyone needs to know it. Your colleague doesn't need to know about your childhood trauma when you set a boundary at work. Your acquaintance doesn't need to know about your financial struggles when you decline an expensive outing. Your family doesn't need to know about your mental health journey when you choose not to attend a gathering. You can hold those truths. You can honor them. You can let them inform your decisions. And you can keep them to yourself. Because your story is yours, and you get to choose who you share it with. This isn't about being secretive. It's about being selective. It's about understanding that intimacy is earned, not owed. That your full truth is a gift you give to people who've proven they'll handle it with care, not something you owe to anyone who asks. When you practice the story you don't tell, you stop feeling guilty for not explaining everything. You stop feeling like you're hiding something when you keep your reasoning private. You start understanding that holding your truth close is a form of self-protection, not selfishness. Now let's address the hardest part of all of this, the discomfort. Because even when you have all these tools, even when you know intellectually that you don't need to explain yourself, your body is still going to react when you don't. This is where you need the comfort with discomfort practice, the deliberate, conscious practice of sitting with the anxiety that arises when you don't explain, and learning that the feeling passes and you survive. When you set a boundary without justification, your nervous system panics, your chest tightens, your heart races, your mind floods with catastrophic scenarios about what the other person is thinking, how angry they are, how this is going to ruin everything. This is normal. This is your conditioning. This is every moment from your childhood when not explaining meant danger, when holding firm meant rejection, when saying no meant losing love. But you're not in those moments anymore. You're here. You're safe. And the feeling, as intense as it is just a feeling. It's not a fact. It's not a prediction. It's an alarm from a system that learned to fear something that's no longer actually dangerous. So you practice. You set a boundary. The discomfort comes. And instead of rushing to fix it with explanation, you sit with it. You breathe. You notice where you feel it in your body. You remind yourself that this feeling is temporary, that it will pass, that you can survive it. You might count your breaths. You might feel your feet on the ground. You might remind yourself out loud, "This is uncomfortable and I'm okay. This feeling will pass. I don't need to fix this with words." And then you wait. You let the wave of anxiety crest. You let it peak. And you watch it start to recede. Because it always does. Feelings are temporary. Even the intense ones. Even the ones that feel like they're going to consume you. The more you practice this, the less power the discomfort has. Your nervous system starts to learn a new pattern. Setting boundaries without explaining doesn't lead to disaster. The anxiety comes, and then it goes. You survive. You're okay. The relationship continues, or it doesn't. But either way, you remain whole. This is how these tools layer together into emotional resilience. You use the grey rock technique with people who try to bait you. You use the broken record method with people who won't accept your first no. You use compassionate deflection when you want to stay warm while staying firm. You audit your energy regularly to know where you're spending it. You practice holding your story instead of offering it to everyone. And you sit with the discomfort that comes from breaking old patterns, trusting that you'll survive it. None of these tools work in isolation. They work together. They reinforce each other. They give you options, flexibility, nuance. They help you navigate the complexity of real human relationships while still protecting your peace. You're not just learning to say no. You're building a whole system of self-protection. You're developing emotional resilience that will serve you for the rest of your life. You're becoming someone who can handle discomfort, set boundaries, protect energy, and stay true to yourself even when everything in you wants to collapse back into old patterns. This is the practice. This is the work. And you're doing it. One tool at a time. One uncomfortable moment at a time. One boundary at a time. You have the tools now. You know the techniques. You've practiced setting boundaries without explanation. You've sat with the discomfort. You've started to notice the patterns and interrupt them before they take over. But tools alone won't sustain this transformation, because you're not just trying to change a behavior. You're trying to change your entire relationship with yourself and the world around you, and that kind of change requires more than technique. It requires foundation, structure, a life built in a way that supports who you're becoming instead of pulling you back into who you used to be. This is where you shift from learning skills to building systems, from practicing new behaviors to creating an environment where those behaviors become natural, from fighting against your conditioning to establishing a life where your conditioning has less power over you. Let's start with the most important structural element, the people around you, because you can practice boundaries all day long. But if you're surrounded by people who don't respect them, you're going to exhaust yourself. You're going to feel like you're constantly swimming upstream. You're going to wonder why this is so hard when everyone says it should get easier. It's hard because your environment is working against you. And you need to change that. You need to surround yourself with people who respect no as a complete sentence. People who don't interrogate your boundaries. People who trust your judgment. People who demonstrate, through their actions, that they believe you're capable of making decisions about your own life without needing to defend those decisions to them. This doesn't mean you cut off everyone who's ever asked you why. It means you pay attention. You notice who consistently honors your boundaries and who consistently challenges them. You notice who makes space for your autonomy and who treats your choices like problems that need to be solved. And then you make decisions based on what you notice. Maybe you spend more time with the people who respect you and less time with the people who drain you. Maybe you change the nature of certain relationships, keeping them more surface level instead of deep and intimate. Maybe you have direct conversations with people you love, explaining that you're changing this pattern and you need their support. Some people will adjust. They'll learn that you mean what you say. They'll stop pushing. They'll start trusting you. Those relationships will deepen in ways you didn't expect, because respect creates intimacy that obligation never could. Other people won't adjust. They'll keep demanding explanations. They'll keep treating your boundaries like inconveniences. They'll make it clear, through their continued behavior, that they're not willing or able to relate to you in this new way. And you'll have to decide what to do with that information. Not immediately, not dramatically, but over time you'll feel yourself pulling back, creating distance, protecting your energy, because you've learned something crucial. The people who are meant for you will never make you fight for basic respect. Your environment isn't just about people, though. It's about your whole life. The way you structure your days, the routines you build, the habits you cultivate. All of it either reinforces your worth or undermines it. You need to create routines that reinforce your worth without productivity or achievement as evidence. This is subtle, but critical, because if your sense of value is tied to what you accomplish, you'll always feel like you need to justify your existence. You'll always feel like your worth is something you have to earn, prove, defend. What does a routine look like that reinforces inherent worth? It's a routine that includes rest without guilt, pleasure without productivity, time that's not optimized or monetized or used to achieve something, time that exists simply because you deserve to exist. It's taking a walk not because you need exercise but because you want to be outside. It's reading a book not because it's educational but because you enjoy it. It's spending an afternoon doing absolutely nothing and not feeling like you need to justify that to yourself or anyone else. It's building in moments throughout your day where you check in with yourself, not to assess your productivity, to assess your peace. Are you okay? Do you need something? What would feel good right now? And then honoring whatever answer comes up, even if it's not efficient or impressive or something you could explain to someone else. These routines teach you something your conditioning tried to erase, that you matter because you exist, not because of what you do, that your presence has value independent of your performance, that you don't need to achieve anything to deserve kindness, rest, pleasure, autonomy. The more you practice this, the less you feel the need to explain yourself, because explanation is what you do when you don't believe you're inherently deserving, when you think your choices need to be justified by productivity or logic or someone else's approval, when you've forgotten that you're enough, exactly as you are, choosing exactly what you're choosing. Now let's go deeper, into identity. Because at the core of over-explanation is a confusion about who you are, a belief that you are what you do, that your identity is the same as your choices, your achievements, your roles, your functions. And if that's true, if you are what you do, then every choice you make is a statement about your worth. Every boundary you set is a test of your value. Every decision is evidence that either proves you're good enough or proves you're not. No wonder you explain everything. You're not just defending a choice, you're defending yourself. Your entire sense of self is on trial every time someone questions you. This is why identity work is essential. You need to separate who you are from what you do. You need to understand that your value exists independent of other people's comprehension, approval, or agreement. You are not your job. You are not your relationship status. You are not your achievements or your failures. You are not the roles you play or the functions you serve. You are not even the choices you make. You are the awareness beneath all of that, the consciousness that observes, the self that exists whether you're productive or not, successful or not, understood or not, approved of or not. This sounds philosophical, maybe even abstract, but it has immediate, practical implications. Because when you know who you are beneath all the doing, you stop needing to defend the doing. When your identity isn't tied to your choices don't need to be perfect or universally understood. You can make a decision, and even if it turns out to be wrong, you're still you, still whole, still worthy. You can set a boundary, and even if someone doesn't like it, you're still okay, still deserving of respect, still valid in your existence. This is freedom, real freedom. Not the freedom to never be questioned, but the freedom to be questioned and know that the question doesn't threaten your core self. So how do you build this? How do you strengthen your sense of self apart from what you do? You practice. You create maintenance practices that keep you connected to who you are beneath all the noise. You do regular check-ins with yourself about where you're still over-explaining. Not to judge yourself, to notice, to bring awareness to the pattern so you can choose differently next time. Maybe once a week, you sit down and ask yourself, where did I over-explain this week? What triggered it? What was I afraid would happen if I didn't explain? You journal to process the urge before it becomes action. When you feel the pull to explain, to justify, to defend, you write it out instead of speaking it. You get all the reasons out on paper. You let yourself have the full internal experience of explaining without giving that explanation to another person. Often, by the time you're done writing, you realize you don't actually need to say any of it. The urge has passed. You've processed it. You can move on. You build a support system of people who model healthy boundaries. Not just people who respect yours, but people who have their own. People who can say no without apologizing. People who make choices and let them stand. People who demonstrate, through how they live, that boundaries aren't cruel or cold, they're necessary and kind. You watch these people. You learn from them. You ask them how they do it. You let them remind you, when you're struggling, that this is possible, that you're not alone in this work, that other people have rewired these patterns and so can you. And you work on self-trust. Because underneath all of this, underneath every over-explanation, every defensive justification, every desperate attempt to make someone understand, there's often a deeper issue. You don't trust yourself. You don't trust that your choices are good enough. You don't trust that your reasoning is sound. You don't trust that you know what's best for you. So you seek validation from others. You explain until they agree with you, until they approve, until they confirm that yes, your choice makes sense. Yes, you're doing the right thing. Yes, you're okay. But here's what you need to understand. Their agreement doesn't actually make your choice more valid. Their approval doesn't actually make you more okay. You're seeking external confirmation for something that can only come from inside. You need to trust yourself. And trust is built the same way with yourself as it is with anyone else, through consistency, through follow-through, through making promises and keeping them. You start small. You make a choice, a tiny one. What to eat for lunch, whether to answer a text right away or later, what to do with a free hour. You make the choice based on what you actually want, not on what you think you should want or what someone else would approve of. And then you honor that choice. You don't second-guess it. You don't apologize for it. You don't explain it. You just make it and move forward. Each time you do this, you're building trust with yourself. You're proving that you can make a decision and stand by it. You're showing yourself that you don't need external validation to know your choice was right. You're learning that internal clarity is enough. And as that trust builds, something shifts. The need to explain diminishes. Because explanation is what you do when you're not sure, when you're trying to convince yourself as much as the other person, when you need their understanding to feel confident in your choice. But when you trust yourself, when you've made a decision from a place of real internal clarity, you don't need their understanding. You don't need their approval. You already know this is right for you, and that knowing makes external justification obsolete. This is what long-term success looks like. Not perfection, not never feeling the urge to explain, but having a life structured in a way that supports your growth, having people around you who respect your autonomy, having routines that reinforce your inherent worth, having a strong sense of self that exists independent of what you do or what others think, having practices that keep you connected to your truth, having self-trust that makes other people's opinions less powerful. You're not just learning to stop explaining. You're building a whole life that doesn't require it. A life where your peace is the priority, where your boundaries are assumed, not debated, where your choices are yours to make, not yours to defend. This is the foundation. Build it strong, build it steady, because everything else rests on this. You've been doing the work, you've been practicing the tools, you've been building the foundation. And maybe part of you still wonders if this is real, if this transformation is actually possible, if changing these patterns will truly change your life the way it promises to. So let's talk about what's actually happening in your brain and body when you over-explain. Let's look at the science. Not because you need permission from research to trust your own experience, but because understanding the mechanics of what's been happening to you makes everything click into place. It turns struggle into clarity. It replaces doubt with certainty. This isn't just psychology. This isn't just about feelings or thoughts or behaviors you can choose to change. This is neurobiology. This is your nervous system operating exactly as it was designed to, responding to patterns it learned when you were too young to choose differently. Let's start with what happens in your brain when someone asks you a question and you feel that immediate surge of anxiety, that tightness in your chest, that need to explain, justify, prove yourself. That's not weakness. That's your amygdala doing its job. Your amygdala is the part of your brain responsible for processing threat. It's ancient, primitive. It doesn't understand nuance or context. It doesn't care about logic. Its only job is to keep you alive. And it learned, probably when you were very young, that when people ask you questions, especially authority figures, and you don't have good answers, bad things happen. Maybe not physically dangerous things, but emotionally dangerous things. Rejection, disappointment, withdrawal of love, anger, punishment. And to a child's brain, emotional danger is existential threat, because for our ancestors, being rejected from the social group meant death. You couldn't survive alone. So the brain evolved to treat social rejection as seriously as physical danger. When your amygdala learned that questions equal potential rejection, it started firing every time someone questioned you. It interpreted every why as a challenge to your survival, and it triggered what's called the stress response, the cascade of hormones designed to help you fight, flee, or freeze in the face of danger. Here's what that cascade looks like. Your amygdala fires. It sends a signal to your hypothalamus. Your hypothalamus activates your pituitary gland. Your pituitary gland sends a message to your adrenal glands. And your adrenal glands flood your system with cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate increases. Your blood pressure rises. Your muscles tense. Your digestion slows. Your immune system suppresses. All your body's resources redirect toward immediate survival. And your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thought, decision-making, and emotional regulation, goes offline. This is why you can't think clearly when someone questions you. This is why you stumble over your words. This is why you say things you don't mean or agree to things you don't want. Your survival brain has taken over. And survival brain doesn't care about long-term consequences. It only cares about making the immediate threat stop. So what does survival brain do? It explains, it justifies, it defends, because somewhere in your history, explanation made the threat go away. Explanation restored safety. And your brain remembers that every single time. Now here's the problem. This stress response is supposed to be temporary. It's designed for acute danger, a predator attacking, a physical threat, something that requires immediate action and then resolves. Your body mobilizes, you handle the threat, and then your nervous system returns to baseline. That's how it's supposed to work. But when you're chronically over-explaining, when you're constantly defending yourself, when every day brings multiple moments where you feel like you need to justify your existence, your stress response never turns off. You're living in a state of perpetual perceived threat. And chronic stress destroys you. It doesn't just feel bad. It damages your body. Elevated cortisol suppresses your immune system, making you more susceptible to illness. It disrupts your sleep, making it harder to regulate emotions and think clearly. It increases inflammation throughout your body, contributing to everything from heart disease to autoimmune disorders. It literally changes the structure of your brain, shrinking your hippocampus, the part responsible for memory and learning, and enlarging your amygdala, making you even more reactive to perceived threats. This is what chronic over-explanation does to you physiologically. This is the cost your body pays for constantly operating in defense mode. But there's another cost, one that's less visible but just as damaging. Cognitive load, mental bandwidth, the limited amount of mental resources you have available at any given moment for thinking, deciding, creating, problem-solving, being present. Think of your brain's processing power like the RAM on a computer. You only have so much. And when too many programs are running at once, everything slows down. Things start crashing. You can't perform at your best because you don't have the resources available. Every time you're explaining yourself, justifying your choices, defending your boundaries, rehearsing conversations, replaying interactions, worrying about whether you said enough or said the right thing, You're running programs. Lots of them. Constantly. And they're taking up space that could be used for so many other things. Creativity requires mental bandwidth. You can't be creative when your brain is busy defending itself. Problem-solving requires cognitive resources. You can't think clearly about complex challenges when you're using all your processing power to manage other people's reactions to your choices. Presence requires availability. You can't be fully engaged in the moment you're in when part of your mind is always running the "Did I explain myself well enough?" program in the background. This is why over-explanation makes you feel so exhausted, even when you haven't done anything physically demanding. You're running your brain at maximum capacity all day long. You're never truly resting, never fully present, never operating at your full potential, because so much of your potential is being drained by constant self-defense. Now let's talk about external validation dependence, because this is where the psychology gets really interesting and really damaging. When you constantly seek understanding and approval from others before you feel confident in your choices, you're literally weakening your internal decision-making capacity. You're training your brain that the right answer exists outside of you, that you can't trust your own judgment until someone else validates it. And here's what happens neurologically. Every time you seek external validation and receive it, you get a hit of dopamine. It feels good. It relieves anxiety. It temporarily convinces you that you're okay. But it also reinforces the pathway. It teaches your brain that the way to feel confident is to get someone else to approve of you. So you keep seeking it, over and over. And your internal validation system, your ability to trust yourself, to know what's right for you, independent of what anyone else thinks, atrophies. Like a muscle you never use, it gets weaker and weaker until you genuinely don't know how to trust your own judgment anymore. This shows up in research. Studies on people-pleasing behaviors consistently find correlations with anxiety disorders. People who chronically seek approval, who struggle to set boundaries, who over-explain their choices, they have significantly higher rates of generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, and depression. And it makes sense when you understand the mechanism. You're living in a state where your worth feels constantly under evaluation, where your choices need external validation to feel legitimate, where you can't relax because you're always monitoring how other people are reacting to you. That's an exhausting, anxiety-producing way to live. But here's the powerful part. Here's where the science becomes empowering, instead of just explaining why you're struggling. Everything we've talked about so far, it's reversible. Your brain is plastic. It can change, it can form new pathways, it can learn new patterns, and every time you practice a new behavior, you're literally rewiring your neural circuitry. This is called neuroplasticity, and it's the reason transformation is possible. The pathways that make you over-explain, they're strong because you've used them thousands of times. You've reinforced them over and over for years, maybe decades. But they're not permanent. They're just well-traveled roads in your brain. And every time you set a boundary without explaining it, you're creating a new pathway. Every time you sit with the discomfort, instead of rushing to defend yourself, you're strengthening a different circuit. Every time you choose self-trust over external validation, you're building new neural infrastructure. At first, the new pathway is weak. It's a dirt path, while the old pattern is a superhighway. So your brain defaults to the superhighway. That's why the beginning is so hard. That's why you keep falling back into old patterns even when you know better. You're not failing. You're just using the stronger pathway because it's easier and more familiar. But every single time you use the new pathway, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it feels wrong, even if you're not sure you're doing it right, you're strengthening it. You're making it a little wider, a little smoother, a little easier to access next time. And simultaneously, the old pathway starts to weaken. Because neural pathways that don't get used start to fade. This is called synaptic pruning. This means every unexplained boundary builds your capacity for the next one. Not metaphorically. Literally. You're physically changing your brain. You're creating neural circuitry that supports healthy boundaries, self-trust, and internal validation. And as these new pathways strengthen, something else happens. Your amygdala starts to calm down. Because you're teaching it, through repeated experience, that questions aren't threats, that you can set a boundary, experience discomfort, and survive, that other people's confusion or disappointment doesn't actually endanger you. Your nervous system learns to regulate. Your stress response becomes appropriate to actual threats instead of firing at everything. Your cortisol levels normalize. Your immune system strengthens. Your sleep improves. Your cognitive load decreases because you're not running those defense programs constantly anymore. And your sense of confidence, real, internal confidence that doesn't require external validation, grows. Not because you're trying to feel confident, but because confidence is what emerges naturally when your brain trusts itself, when you've proven through repeated experience that you can make decisions, handle consequences, and survive discomfort. Research on boundary setting and mental health confirms this. People who develop strong boundaries show decreased anxiety, increased self-esteem, better relationship satisfaction, and improved overall well-being. And it's not because boundaries magically fix everything. It's because boundaries reflect and reinforce self-trust, and self-trust is the foundation of mental health. This is what's happening in your brain and body as you do this work. This is the science underneath the transformation. You're not just changing behaviors, you're changing your neurobiology. You're rewiring your stress response. You're building new neural pathways. You're teaching your nervous system what actual safety feels like. And that's not just powerful, it's permanent. Because once you've built these new pathways, once your brain has learned these new patterns, they become your new default. Not overnight. Not without continued practice and maintenance. But over time, with consistency, the new way becomes the easy way, the natural way, the way you operate without thinking about it. You're not fighting against your brain anymore. You're working with it, using its capacity for change to create lasting transformation, trusting the science that says this is possible, that you can rewire decades of conditioning, that your nervous system can learn to feel safe even when you're not explaining yourself. This is real. This is measurable. This is happening in your actual neurons every time you practice these new patterns. And that should give you hope. Because if it's happening in your biology, it's not just a mindset shift or a temporary change. It's a fundamental rewiring of how you operate in the world. You're not just learning to stop explaining. You're becoming someone whose brain doesn't need to anymore. You know the science now. You understand the mechanics. You've practiced the tools in calm moments, in low-stakes situations, in conversations where the pressure wasn't too intense. And maybe it's been working. Maybe you've been setting boundaries, staying quiet, feeling proud of yourself for not collapsing into explanation every time someone asks a question. But then life turns up the heat. Then you're in a situation where everything inside you is screaming to explain, where the pressure is so intense you can barely breathe, where staying quiet feels impossible, dangerous, cruel. This is where theory meets reality. This is where you find out if the transformation is real. This is where you learn to hold your ground when everything pushes back. Let's start with the family holiday. You're home, everyone's gathered, and within the first hour, someone asks about your life, your job, your relationship status, your plans, your choices. The questions that sound casual but carry weight. The questions that aren't really questions. They're evaluations disguised as conversation. You've decided to change careers, or end a relationship, or move to a new city, or stay single, or not have children, or have children, or whatever choice you've made that doesn't align with their expectations. And they want to know why. Not because they're curious, because they're concerned, because they don't understand, because your choice makes them uncomfortable, and they need you to explain it in a way that makes their discomfort go away. The old you would launch into a presentation. You'd justify every angle. You'd anticipate their objections and address them preemptively. You'd perform certainty, even if you felt doubt. You'd exhaust yourself trying to make them understand so thoroughly that they couldn't possibly judge you. But you're not doing that anymore. So you say something simple. I've made a change. I'm excited about it. And then you reach for your water. You take a breath. You redirect the conversation. How's your work going? They don't let it go. Of course they don't. But why would you leave a stable job? What's wrong with the relationship you were in? Don't you think you should wait? Have you really thought this through? Every question feels like an accusation. Every concerned face feels like judgment. And your nervous system is firing. Your chest is tight. Your hands are shaking slightly. Everything in you wants to defend yourself, to prove you're not making a mistake, to make them see that you're competent, thoughtful, deserving of respect. But you don't. You use the tools. You acknowledge without explaining. I know it seems sudden. I'm confident in my decision. You become a broken record. I've thought it through. You compassionately deflect. I appreciate your concern, and this is what's right for me. And you sit with how hard this is, how every fiber of your being wants to cave, how their disappointment feels like it's crushing your chest, how the silence, after your non-explanation, feels like condemnation. But you stay. You breathe. You remind yourself that their confusion is not your emergency, that you don't owe them the full story just because you're related, that love doesn't mean unlimited access to your internal world. Some of them will back off. Some will respect your boundary, even if they don't understand it. And some won't. Some will keep pushing, keep questioning, keep making you feel like you're being unreasonable just by not explaining yourself to their satisfaction. And that's information. That tells you who respects your autonomy and who doesn't. Who can love you without controlling you. Who can sit with their own discomfort instead of making it your job to fix. Now a different scenario. A breakup. You've decided it's over. You know it in your bones. The relationship isn't working. You're not happy. You don't want to continue, and you need to end it. The other person asks why. They deserve that, don't they? They deserve to understand what went wrong, what they did, what you need, how this could be fixed if only you'd explain it clearly enough. And part of you agrees. Part of you feels cruel for not giving them the detailed breakdown they're asking for. Part of you wants to explain every reason, every moment, every incompatibility until they understand so completely that they can't possibly be hurt. But that's not how this works. Explanation doesn't ease heartbreak. Understanding doesn't make rejection hurt less. And giving them every reason you're leaving only gives them things to argue with, things to promise to change, things to use to convince you to stay. So you don't. You say the truth simply. This relationship isn't working for me anymore. I know that's painful to hear, and it's my decision. They push back. Of course they do. But why? What did I do wrong? If you'd just tell me, I could fix it. You owe me an explanation. After everything we've been through, you owe me that. And this is where it gets really hard. Because they're hurting, their pain is real, their tears are real, their confusion is genuine, and you care about them. You don't want them to suffer. You don't want to be the person causing this pain. But explaining won't actually help. It will only prolong this. It will only give them false hope that if they understand well enough, they can change your mind. It will only make you both hold on to something that's already over. So you hold firm. I know you're hurting. I know you want to understand. And the truth is, some things can't be explained in a way that makes them hurt less. This is my decision. It's final, and I'm sorry. They might get angry. They might accuse you of being cold, heartless, cruel. They might tell you that anyone decent would at least explain, that you're being unfair, that you're a coward for not giving them what they deserve. And you have to sit with that. You have to let them be angry. You have to accept that they see you as the villain right now. You have to trust that refusing to explain doesn't make you cruel. It makes you honest. Because the cruelest thing you could do is give them hope by engaging in a negotiation about something that's not negotiable. This is the difference between cruelty and clarity. Cruelty would be explaining in ways designed to hurt, listing all their flaws, making them feel inadequate, using your reasons as weapons. Clarity is stating your truth and holding it even when holding it is uncomfortable, even when it would be easier to soften it with explanation, even when they're begging you to say more. Now let's look at work. You've set a boundary. You're not taking on a project that's outside your scope. You're not working weekends anymore. You're not responding to emails after hours. Whatever it is, you've decided, and you've stated it clearly. Your manager or colleague pushes back. Everyone else does it. Why can't you? This is really important. Are you not a team player? I need to understand why this is such a problem for you. And staying silent here feels dangerous. This is your livelihood, your reputation, your career. Surely this is a situation where you need to explain, where not explaining could cost you everything. But here's what you're learning. Explanation from a place of fear never helps. When you're explaining because you're scared of the consequences of not explaining, you're negotiating from weakness. You're teaching people that if they push hard enough, if they make the stakes feel high enough, you'll cave. So instead, you stay grounded. You acknowledge the concern without backing down. I understand this is important. I'm not able to take this on without deprioritizing other commitments. If you'd like me to do this, let's discuss what comes off my plate. You're not saying no without any information. You're giving them what they need, clarity about your capacity and a path forward if this is truly a priority. But you're not justifying why you have limits. You're not defending your right to have boundaries at work. You're simply stating the reality and letting them decide how to proceed. If they keep pushing, you keep redirecting. I've stated my capacity. I'm happy to discuss priorities, and I'm not able to add this without removing something else. You're a broken record. Calm, clear, consistent. And if they try to make you feel guilty, if they imply you're letting the team down, if they compare you to others who don't have these boundaries, you don't take the bait. Because guilt only works if you believe you're doing something wrong. And you're not. You're being honest about your limits. That's not a failing. That's integrity. One more scenario. A friend. Someone you care about. Someone who's been in your life for years. You've set a boundary with them. Maybe you can't be their therapist anymore. Maybe you can't drop everything when they call. Maybe you need more reciprocity in the relationship. Whatever it is, you've stated it. And they weaponize confusion. I don't understand. I thought we were close. I thought we were there for each other. If you'd just explain why you're being like this, maybe I could understand. This is manipulation. Gentle manipulation, maybe. Probably unconscious manipulation. But manipulation nonetheless. They're using your care for them as leverage to get you to reverse your boundary. They're making your boundary about them being hurt rather than about you protecting your energy. And you have to see it for what it is. You can love someone and still not owe them access to your reasoning. You can care deeply and still protect yourself. You can value the friendship and still refuse to justify your needs. I care about you. This boundary isn't about you being wrong or me not valuing our friendship. It's about what I need to stay healthy in this relationship. I'm not going to debate it, and I hope you can respect it. If they keep pushing, keep trying to make you feel guilty, keep insisting that a real friend would explain, you have a choice to make. Do you keep trying to maintain a friendship with someone who won't respect your boundaries? Or do you accept that some relationships can't survive your growth? This is one of the hardest truths you'll face. Sometimes maintaining your boundary means losing people. Sometimes people can't or won't adjust to the new you. Sometimes the relationship was built on a foundation of you explaining, justifying, managing their emotions. And when you stop doing that, there's nothing left. And that hurts. That's real grief. But it's also clarity. It's information about who was really there for you and who was there for what you could give them. Throughout all of these scenarios, you're learning something crucial. You can stay centered even when emotions run high. You can hold your boundary even when someone is crying, angry, confused, disappointed. You can care about someone's pain without making that pain your responsibility to fix. Their anger is real, but it's not your job to manage. Their hurt is valid, but it's not yours to heal with explanation. Their confusion is genuine, but it's not your emergency to resolve. You're learning that being boundaried isn't being cold. Cold is indifferent. Boundaried is caring while still protecting yourself. Cold is not feeling their pain. Boundaried is feeling their pain and choosing not to sacrifice yourself to ease it. You're learning that you can love someone and still say no. That you can be kind and still be firm. That you can be compassionate and still refuse to explain yourself into exhaustion. This is what it looks like to hold your ground when everything pushes back. Not perfectly. Not without discomfort. Not without moments where you want to give in, give up, go back to the old way because it's familiar even if it's killing you. But you don't. You stay. You breathe. You hold. And you discover that you're stronger than you thought. That you can survive their disappointment. That their anger doesn't destroy you. that you remain whole even when they don't understand. This is the fire that forges you. This is where transformation becomes permanent. Because once you've held your boundary under this kind of pressure and survived, you know you can do it again. And again. And again. You're not heartless. You're honest. And that honesty is the most loving thing you can offer, to them and to yourself. You've held your ground through the fire. You've sat with the discomfort. You've watched people push back, and you didn't collapse. You've felt the pressure, and you didn't break. And somewhere in that process, without you even noticing exactly when it happened, you changed. Not the kind of change where you're trying to be different. The kind where you simply are different. Where the new way of being has become so natural, so integrated into who you are, that you can't remember exactly what it felt like to live the old way. You can remember the exhaustion. You can remember the anxiety. But you can't quite access the person who believed that explaining was necessary for survival. That person is gone, and in their place is someone you're still getting to know. Someone who moves through the world differently. Someone who takes up space without apologizing for it. Someone who trusts themselves so deeply that other people's confusion doesn't shake them. This is who you are now. Let's paint the portrait so you can see yourself clearly. So you can recognize the transformation that's already happened. So you can step fully into this new identity and claim it as your own. You wake up in the morning and you don't immediately start rehearsing conversations. You don't lie there running through potential scenarios where you might need to defend yourself. You don't preemptively craft explanations for choices you haven't even made yet. You just wake up. You start your day. You trust that you'll handle whatever comes. Someone asks you a question, and your nervous system doesn't flood with panic. Your chest doesn't tighten. Your mind doesn't race to construct the perfect response. You simply answer if you want to. Or you don't. Either way, you're okay. You make a decision about work, about relationships, about how to spend your time, and you don't need to immediately justify it to yourself or anyone else. You choose. You move forward. You let the choice stand on its own merit, because you trust that you made it from a place of clarity. You trust your own judgment, and that trust is unshakable. Your energy stays with you now. It doesn't leak out through constant explanation. It doesn't drain away defending choices that were always yours to make. You feel it. You can actually feel the difference. You have capacity for things that matter. Creativity, presence, joy, deep thinking, real connection. All the things that were impossible when you were running your entire system on defense mode. You've become someone who can be misunderstood and not just survive it, but be completely unbothered by it. Someone doesn't get you? That's okay. They don't need to. Their comprehension of your choices isn't required for those choices to be valid. Their approval isn't a prerequisite for you to move forward. You can hold your truth while they hold their confusion, and both can exist without conflict. This doesn't make you cold. If anything, you're warmer now, more present, more genuinely connected, because you're not performing anymore. You're not managing everyone's perception of you. You're not trying to control how people see you by explaining yourself into exhaustion. You're just here, fully, authentically. And that presence is magnetic in a way performance never was. The right people feel it. They respond to it. They're drawn to someone who isn't constantly seeking validation, who isn't always defending themselves, who knows who they are and doesn't need anyone else to confirm it. These people respect your boundaries without needing explanations. They trust your judgment. They say okay when you say no. They don't treat your autonomy like a problem to be solved. And the wrong people? They've mostly filtered themselves out by now. Because you're no longer available for relationships that require constant justification. You're not interested in connections that drain your energy through endless demands for explanation. You've learned to recognize the people who see your boundaries as challenges, and you've learned to let them go. Not with anger, not with resentment, just with clarity. Some people can't relate to you in this new way. Some people need you to be smaller, more accommodating, more willing to defend your existence. And that's information about them, not about you. You can wish them well and still protect your peace. You've discovered something that seemed impossible when you started this journey. Your peace is not up for negotiation. It's not something you argue for. It's not something you win by making the best case. It's something you claim, something you protect, something you prioritize above other people's comfort with your choices. Your boundaries are not open for debate. You don't present them as proposals awaiting approval. You state them as facts. This is what works for me. This is what I need. This is what I'm choosing. And then you let them stand. No defense, no justification, no lengthy explanation of your reasoning. Just the boundary, clear and firm and non-negotiable. Your life is not a courtroom. You're not on trial. You don't have to prove your case to a jury of everyone you encounter. You don't have to demonstrate that your choices meet some objective standard of reasonableness before you're allowed to make them. You're the only authority you need. Your own clarity is enough. Imagine what this looks like in practice. You're at a social gathering. Someone asks about your life. You share what feels comfortable to share. They ask for more details. You smile and redirect. Not much to tell beyond that. How about you? No anxiety, no guilt, no sense that you're being rude or withholding. Just a calm boundary held with ease. You're having a conversation with family. They express concern about a choice you've made. You acknowledge their concern. I hear you. And then you don't engage with it further. You don't try to convince them. You don't need them to agree. You can hold your decision while they hold their worry, and you don't have to fix the tension between those two things. You're at work. Someone challenges your approach. You listen to their perspective. You consider whether it changes your thinking. It doesn't. So you say, I appreciate your input. I'm moving forward with this approach. No elaborate defense of why their suggestion won't work. No detailed explanation of your process. Just clarity. Just confidence. Just trust in your own judgment. You're ending a relationship that's no longer serving you. The other person wants to understand. They're asking questions. They're expressing hurt. And you can sit with all of that. Their pain, their confusion, their desire for answers, without making it your job to resolve. You can say, I know this is hard. I'm still moving forward. And you can mean both parts equally. Compassion and firmness. Care and boundary. Love and release. This is who you are now. Someone who moves through the world with quiet confidence. Not the loud confidence of someone trying to prove something. The quiet confidence of someone who has nothing to prove. Who knows their own mind. Who trusts their own heart. Who doesn't need external validation to know they're making the right choices. Your no is complete. It's not the beginning of a negotiation. It's not an invitation for someone to convince you otherwise. It's not a statement that requires supporting documentation. It's complete. It's final. It's enough. Your energy is protected. You know where it goes. You know who deserves it. You know when to give and when to hold back. You're not giving it away to people who don't value it. You're not spending it on endless explanation to people who are never going to understand anyway. You're keeping it, using it for things that matter, for people who honor it, for work that fulfills you, for presence that enriches your life. Your presence speaks louder than any explanation ever could. The way you carry yourself tells people everything they need to know. This is someone who knows who they are. This is someone who respects themselves. This is someone who won't be swayed by guilt or manipulation or the discomfort of being misunderstood. This is someone who's free. And you are free. Not because everyone understands you. Not because you've finally found the perfect explanation that makes everyone approve of your choices. Not because you've managed to live in a way that makes everyone comfortable. You're free because you no longer need them to understand. You no longer require their approval. You no longer measure your worth by their comprehension of your choices. You've learned the most liberating truth there is. You are not responsible for other people's understanding. You are not accountable to their expectations. You are not required to make sense to anyone but yourself. And when you truly embody that truth, when you live from that place, everything changes. Relationships become clearer. Work becomes easier. Decisions become simpler. Life becomes lighter. Because you're not carrying the weight of everyone else's opinions anymore. You're not performing for an audience that was never going to be satisfied. You're not trying to convince people who are never going to be convinced. You're just living, making choices, setting boundaries, protecting your peace, being yourself without apology or explanation. This is the transformation. Not perfect, not without moments of doubt or discomfort, but real, lasting, integrated into the core of who you are. You started this journey exhausted, standing in your kitchen at midnight, replaying conversations, wondering why you had to explain so much, feeling the weight of other people's expectations crushing your chest, believing that your worth was measured by how well you could justify your existence. And now you're here, on the other side. Still you, but different, lighter, freer, more fully yourself than you've ever been. You've learned that silence can be powerful, that boundaries can be kind, that you can love people and still not owe them your reasoning, that your peace is worth protecting, that your energy is yours to keep. You've discovered that the relationships that survive your transformation are the ones that were real all along, that the people who truly love you never needed the explanations. That respect doesn't require justification. You've become someone who knows that being misunderstood is not a crisis, that disappointing people is not a catastrophe, that saying no doesn't make you selfish, that protecting yourself doesn't make you cold. You are someone who trusts yourself, who honors yourself, who chooses yourself, not in a way that excludes others, but in a way that includes you. Finally, after all this time, this is who you are now. Someone who no longer explains, someone who's free, someone who's home in themselves, and that changes everything.